Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the ENTP versus the ESTP as the next video in my Explained Correctly series. When talking about these types, first of all, let's look at what they have in common. Well, they have 3 out of the 4 Jungian dichotomies in common. They're both energizers or extroverts, you could say. They're both high energy, breadth oriented types. They get things started, they go into more and more things. Yeah, they're both types which are inclined to get things going, you could say. They're also both logical. They are both good at more objective data and facts and how things work and fit together and make sense. And as a result, they're also not so good at the sort of the more interpersonal, feelings-based side. Given they're both energizers and they're both logicians, they are also both sight-locked. And by sight-locked, that basically means that their asymmetry is one where they are very, very good at the extroverted thinking. They're very good at sort of thinking in terms of how things could work, how to make things work, how to fix problems and improve solutions. They're very good at getting across a lot about data and really learning it and applying it well and quite quickly. But they are not good at the introverted feeling side. That's the other side of that asymmetry. They're really bad when it comes to consulting their own personal attitudes, their relationships towards others. They're not good at that. So, yeah, by them being logical and extroverted, it means that they are sight-locked, and that means that they're not good in introverted feeling, but very good at extroverted thinking. It also means, though, that they are both able to balance both a sort of introverted thinking, more structured, internal consistency oriented approach, with a more extroverted feeling, more sort of impressing, getting people excited about things approach to people. They can do both the extroverted feeling and the introverted thinking, you could say. So yeah, if I continue in terms of the Jungian dichotomies, so I jumped into a Iranian dichotomy there, but other Jungian dichotomy is that they are both irrational. And by being both irrational, that means that they are about a sort of a what is or what could be rather than what ought to be, what should be. There's a certain, you could say maybe an impulsive whimsicality about these types because they are energizers and they're irrational. There's a sense of very sort of quick and fleeting interests or objects of attention, and they focus on one thing, then they'll suddenly, like almost like lightning, switch to another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. So very sort of quick changing attention on things, motivated by rapidly changing desires and areas of fixation. And this also means that they are reductivist. The idea everything is distinct and defined differently from everything else. So it's not about everything being sort of amorphous and overall without some sort of clear distinction or boundaries. No, for both the ENTP and the ESTP, they're high energy. They have sort of these rapidly changing interests, motivated by a sense of what they like, what they desire, what they want, either physically or potentially they want or take interest in. And yet that reductivism, that staticness, you could say, means it is a very sudden switch. It's not a continuous rolling effect. It's a high energy, high quickness switching between different things, which that reductiveness brings. Also, by being reductivists and being logical, these are also going to be types where the kind of logic they both focus on more in terms of their overall worldview is going to be the introverted thinking. So yes, they can do the more sort of extroverted thinking. They're very, very good at extroverted thinking, a more dynamic sort of pragmatic approach. But really in terms of how they see the world, it's more in terms of the structures, how things almost bolt and fit together and make sense and cohere or do not cohere and actually contradict, and they're more likely to bring that emphasis into their understanding of the world, bring the emphasis in terms of what they focus on in their conversations with others. It will be about the structures, it will be about the frameworks or theories of truth in terms of how things fit together in that kind of way, rather than just a piecemeal whatever works approach of the facts. This also means that they are both clarity seekers as opposed to integrity seekers. These are types which, in terms of their approach to logic, what kind of logic they value or thinking they value, it is that clear-cut, structured-based way of preferring things, rather than an it depends on the situation pragmatic approach. They are far more interested in the logical structures of how things hang together and make sense. And similarly, they will value the more extroverted feeling, which is going to be more about very open, clear communications of mood. And they're more interested in that terms of that group mood, how people are feeling, what the buzz or the energy is, than they are in the deeper sort of one-to-one personal relationships and attitudes. In fact, on those sort of personal one-to-one relationships and attitudes, which, as I said, is an area of clear weakness to them, it's also an area which they really do not value. And both of them really struggle with the idea of really coming across sincerely in maintaining stable relationships of certain psychological distances. They don't really think in that way, and this becomes far more of a blind spot to them, you could say. This also leads me to another thing, which is that they are contrarian types, both of them. Now, contrarian, this is about their ethics being stubborn and their logic actually being quite flexible. And this is the thing, right, with these types. Whereas their logic is, what I say, is sort of very masterful. They have that perfect sort of fluid blend of both the sort of very, very sort of strong, high energy, you could say, extroverted thinking, and a slightly lower energy, but more valued introverted thinking, working in tandem with each other in that sort of flexible way, meaning that they're very, very good, about some of the best types, sort of quickly getting across the information, understanding how that structures together and fits together, and how to then sort of adapt and revise their structures with new information coming in. So they are basically fluid structuralists as opposed to pure pragmatists. They're very good at blending both those kinds of thinking together in real time. But their ethics is going to be weak because they are logical types, but it's also going to be stubborn because they are their fluidities in their logic. So these are types where, if you add that to their clarity-seeking values, it means they're going to take a very concerted, mobilizing function approach towards extroverted ethics, trying to prove that they are people who are likable to others, that they can be well received by people, trying to express their emotions, making attempts to do so in a way which is going to be well received and be perhaps admired or loved by others. And that may backfire, and that can take a hit to their ego if that happens. But in doing so, they're completely disregarding the introverted ethics, the closer one-to-one personal relationships with others, which is why they can end up having that sort of buffoon effect, which comes from sort of weak fragility in ethics, with a very, very clear valuing leading towards the extroverted ethics and away from the introverted ethics, or extroverted feeling and introverted feeling. So yeah, but those are all ways in which that they have in common. You get this sort of buffoon effect. You get this focus on the pragmatism as being a clear strength at the expense of any sort of focus on the personal one-to-one attitudes. Their values, as I said, it's more about mood generation and logical structure, and they both see the world in terms of that logical structure, but they very much blend that focus on logical structure with the ability to gain the facts and the resources from that pragmatic thinking more in the background. And I said they're both high energy, get lots of things sort of going and doing things brett forward in that respect, with a sort of whimsical, rapidly changing, flitting from one interest to another, or focus of desire to another, which can make them sort of unpredictable types in terms of their temperament. Anyway, that's what they have in common. Now, what do they differ on? Well, first of all, in terms of the Jungian dichotomies, It's the N versus the S, intuition versus sensing. The ENTP is leading in their extroverted intuition. They are good at the abstract. They're good at the ideas, where things may or may not be going, what will inevitably happen or not inevitably happen. They can see these things. They can see the longer term outcomes. They can see the alternative points of view, anything which is not here right now. That's their focus. Whereas the ESTP, they are sensory. They are grounded in the present day. They are more aware of the details. They are more aware of what needs to be done right here, right now, and also sort of asserting their will in that present moment to get what they want, far more tactically, you could say. Now, you could also say that they have a difference in values. The ILE is world accepting in their values, whereas the SLE, or ESTP you could say, is world rejecting in their values. This is because the ENTP values extroverted intuition and introverted sensing. The ESTP values extroverted sensing and introverted intuition. This leads to a very different effect. The ENTP is looking as their fundamental drive, which is extroverted intuition, because that's the extroverted, irrational, and static or reductivist approach. They are going to be broadening perspectives. They're going to be expanding the breadth of ideas and where things may or may not go. It's all about possibility for an ENTP. Whereas an ESTP is not about possibility. They're about actuality. It is extroverted sensing, which takes that role instead as a leading function because they are sensory. So this is a type which is going to be very much about what I want, how I can get it in the concrete, tangible world, asserting their will, being far more sort of dominant in the present moment, trying to push real life, real terms boundaries as opposed to more opening up potential possibilities. So one is very comfortable in ambiguity. The other is very comfortable in sort of the thrill of the chase, in the sort of competition aspect with other people, in anyone and anything, where sort of winner takes all situation may happen. But also the flip side of this is that the ENTP almost craves and desires sort of far more balanced, more harmonious and sort of comfortable environment to inhabit and explore within. Whereas the ESTP is actually looking for a sense of a longer term purpose or value or meaning to life. They try to find a cause which is worthy enough for them to fight for, something which sort of narrows down the possibilities to where things will inevitably go and their part on that journey. So yeah, the other things we can talk about in terms of their stubbornness, I said where they're similar here, but also where they're different. The ENTP is a determined type, whereas the ESTP is an exacting type. So what this means is that the ENTP has stubborn intuition and very flexible sensation. The ESTP has stubborn sensation and very flexible intuition. So the ENTP, they are very stubborn in that for them, it's about extroverted intuition and not introverted intuition. So they're very much about expanding possibilities, as I've said, and very resistant to the idea of closing down possibilities. And really, they're the ones who set the scope in terms of what is possible and what is not. And they set that scope very broad. Meanwhile, the ESTP is very suggestible in terms of what the scope of possibility is. They will take sort of very sort of soft advice from other people in terms of where things are likely to go. And they can be influenced, therefore, on what is possible and what is not. What the ESTP will not be influenced on is the realm of sensation. The ESTP, because they're role rejecting, they value extroverted sensation. And so they are very firmly fixed towards extroverted sensation, away from introverted sensation because it's stubborn. So they are the ones who are consistently insisting on increasing the intensity, raising the competition, taking action, getting into sort of a conflict of will situation and triumphing and dominating as a result. They're not chilled types. They are high energy, high impact types. They are fire rather than water, you could say. But even when it comes to introverted sensing, they will exert their control over that space. So they won't let anything in their vicinity which they don't want. They will decide what is used and what is done in their immediate space. They will decide what they own, what other people may be allowed to own around them. A good example, you could look at, say, Donald Trump, how it's a good example in the ESTP, who refused to shake hands with certain people because of the potential germs which may come into contact with them. So even in the areas of introverted sensation, which is far less likely to indulge in compared to extroverted sensation, he'll still exert his will. It'll be on his terms. Whereas in the ENTP, you don't see this in terms of the physical sensory environment. They're very suggestible to what other people may do to them. They don't exert clear boundaries in terms of what may be done in the here and now, may not be done in the here and now. They're very sort of laid back in that respect. For them, it's all about the possible, not the actual. With the ESTP, they control the actual, not the possible. Something else I could say? Yes, whereas the ENTP is space-locked, the ESTP is time-locked. So what this means is that for the ENTP, because they're extroverted intuition in that leading function, introvert sensation becomes that suggestive function. So they are very weak at introverted sensing, very strong extroverted intuition. They're very much about the ideation, about the different ideas and possibilities. They have very little very little logistical know-how. Tactical is all right, but logistical is not good for them. They're not good at tracking the details. They miss little things and forget to maintain the details in their lives. It can make them quite sort of ramshackle and messy quite a lot of the time. Whereas the ESTP is a very different separation for them. It's about extroverted sensing, being an area of clear strength and boldness, very lots of energy there. So the introverted intuition becomes the really weak area. And so what you see for the ESTPs, they're very good at acting in the here and now. They live in the here and now. They're tactically brilliant, but they lack strategy. They can't see where things are going in the long run. It's very difficult for them to sort of think further ahead and know with any kind of certainty where things will go. What they like is for other people to create that sense of certainty in terms of where things are going to be going. Doesn't mean they'll lack confidence in taking action. They'll always be very good at taking action. That's not the problem. But it's the knowledge that them taking action in this way will lead eventually to results they can see. If they can see it in front of them, that's fine. They're very good at acting confidently there. If they can't see it in front of them, it's far further off. They'll act perhaps a bit too decisively when it's not right to do so, and they'll run into a brick wall further down the line. And that's where the weakness in introvert intuition can come in. So they need a sense of where things will go. Otherwise, they're more likely to be doubtful about what the outcome is going to be. And they'll rely just on acting blindly as a result. So yes, what this means, though, is that the ENTP is actually quite balanced in terms of being able to pursue both a tactical and strategic approach. They can do both of those. Whereas the ESTP is quite balanced in both the ideational and the logistical. They can balance the divergence of ideas to some degree with an awareness of the day-to-day detail. The ESTP, the ENTP, on the other hand, can act quickly, but also can act more slowly and deliberately in the long term. Okay, so these are the ways in which these types are different, at least in sort of the earlier reigning dichotomies and in the Jungian dichotomies. But there are also other ways in which they differ. So another way is that the ENTP is an identifier. The ESTP is a transformer. So I talked about the values, right? I said that the ENTP is a world-accepting clarity seeker and the ESTP is a world-rejecting clarity seeker. Well, this means that the ENTP is really focused on the placement of ourselves in relation to the rest of the universe. And for ENTP, being world-accepting and clarity-seeking, they're trying to basically bring everything together, create a unified understanding, have everything in peace and harmony, to understand all perspectives, all brought under the same structure and philosophy. The ESTP is not interested in the placement of things to each other so much as they are in the locus of change, which is what makes them a transformer. They're interested in the locus of change. And what's that locus of change for them? Because they are world-rejecting and clarity-seeking, it is the world change. It's the external that's being changed, not the internal. They're not interested in so much changing themselves. They're interested in having their impact on the world, making that big name for themselves, you could say. whereas the ENTP is more interested in sharing different ideas and possibilities, which can then bring people together and raise enthusiasm and excitement about opening up these new possibilities. Which then takes me to affirmer versus denier. The ENTP, in being a type, which is sort of, because they are determined and they're contrarian, they are, and they're energizers. What this means is that they're kind of pushing the extrovert intuition and the extroverted feeling. There's actually quite fluid in the introverted thinking and introverted sensing of what they value. So the ENTP pushing the values of extroverted intuition, extroverted feeling a lot more. It's far more about positive possibility seeking. It's about saying yes to things. In the way, what they're doing is they're bringing things together by saying yes to all the possibilities and including more and more and more possibilities into the picture and giving that sort of enthusiastic positivity towards it. That's what they kind of push in life. That makes them such good sort of science educators or entertainers or things like that. They enjoy that. Meanwhile, the ESTP, rather being an affirmer, which is saying yes to things in that kind of way, yes to sort of virtue of decency, of things being, everything is great. Now, for the ESTP, it's actually more of a denier. They're actually saying no in a certain kind of way. But what is the no that they're saying to? It's not towards decency. It's not to everything being great. It's not saying that everything's terrible. No. They're saying no to a different virtue, which is the virtue of authenticity. For the ESTP, there is no sense really of this is me, this is who I am, I'm a work in progress, I need to grow and develop and get better. The ESTP isn't like that. They are thinking purely in terms of their impact and their cred and their reputation. So ESTP is very much about there isn't authenticity. Who I am is really how I'm coming across and what mark am I making about myself on my reality. Which means the ESTP is not interested in looking within to find out how they can improve and develop themselves. They're not looking to improve and develop themselves. They are looking to make that biggest mark, and they will step in to protect their reputation, to fight off those who may try to attack their reputation in the public sphere. That is going to be the clear focus for them. And so really it's about creating a name for themselves, creating reputation and defending that reputation, because the reputation to them is more real and more authentic than actually themselves. And when they are gone from this world, what will live on is the legacy they've been able to set, the impact they've been able to make, a statue in bronze of them thousands of years from now in true Alexander the Great style. That's why one's an affirm, one's a denier. Also, the ILE is antithetic. The SLE or ESTP is thetic. What does this mean? So the SLE, the ESTP, is the one who's sort of setting the direction for their quadra, for the beta quadra. They start right from the beginning, knowing that the thing they want to do is to exert an impact onto their surroundings, to make that big difference right here, right now, on their surroundings. So they know this straight away. They don't have to sort of discover this. They kind of know this. The thing they need to sort of pick up or learn later is that you need some kind of internalized vision, and you need that sense of who is going to be there on the journey with you, and you making that big impact to really make it sustainable. Without that, their impact can feel transactional. It can feel overly dogmatic and overly sometimes martial or militaristic. It doesn't have that spiritual element which makes it transcendent. So they need that sort of inner spiritual element to make the external change they're making truly sustainable and transcendent. Meanwhile, the ENTP, it is different for them. Then they don't just know the direction. They have to discover that direction. And that direction for them of bringing things together, of harmonizing things peacefully. When they start out in the world, they just know that they are quite free thinkers, quite alternative in their ways of thinking. But they don't really know what to do with that. They don't know what that's leading to or it's meant to mean. It's only later that they discover they're not meant to be the independent thinkers. That's more the role of the gamma entities. They are meant to bring that unique insight to the world, to their community, to the people around them, which can be the means by which they can actually help to bring people together more. So yeah, and they need that sort. They bring that free thinking to a world which would otherwise be run by sheep. They bring that sort of other way of thinking to give something fresh, to give something new to a socialized atmosphere that could run the risk of becoming stagnant without them, or unchanging and unquestioning without them. So they help to open up and free that environment for the questioning, which can then further integrate new perspectives and bring more people together. Finally, we get to clockwise versus anti-clockwise. So the ENTP is clockwise, the ESTP is anti-clockwise. And what this means is that their journey of growth, you could say, is one which lends itself towards social progress, or not. So the ENTP is sort of moving in this sort of spiral, sort of circle, from their demonstrator function, extroverted thinking, and finishing in extroverted feeling, their mobilized function. And they move to that via extroverted intuition, which makes a big difference. So what this means is they're moving from a sense of the practical facts, how things are working, to a sense of how things could be. And then from there, that sense of potential, how things could be, creating an excitement and positivity and motivation, which can then eventually later on lead to some direct action. So there is a sort of progress going on there. It lends itself to that social progress, and being that person who takes in the facts, asks the questions, and gets people excited as part of that social progress and change. The ESTP, on the other hand, they get from the extroverted thinking to the extroverted feeling via extroverted sensation. And that's not the order, that's the reverse order. So that means that for them, they're looking at the facts on the ground, but then going back from the facts and how things work towards engaging in present day reality and making that impact on their surroundings. And from that impact on surroundings, it is then going to the emotional effect. Their actions are having effects on others. It's provoking, it's causing reactions in people. It's creating a notoriety or a fame or something like that. So that is not one which leads to social progress. If anything, it ratchets it back slightly. It goes towards a sense of, I know how things work. Based on how I know, basically knowing how things work, I've made my big impact, and that has led to people to react to me. But that, what goes from there? What would that lead to? It doesn't necessarily lead to something, but it does lead to the SLE becoming known and having that presence and that authority. So what we see is that the ENTP is a type which sort of like it is a type that sort of catalyzes societal changes, whereas ESTP doesn't really catalyze societal changes. What it does is it is very unapologetically beta in slightly overwhelming sense. And so, whereas the ENTP, in throwing these ideas, in catalyzing this change, as long as they have the ISFP with them to sort of manage that and make their ideas more comfortable and palatable towards others, that can lead to a social growth and progress. Whereas ESTP, in being their unapologetically beta selves and making that big impact and roughing things up, they can continue to do that with the help of an INFP to sort of give them that sort of spiritual sense of where things are likely to go, to give them a sense of meaning and direction, but also give them a sense of diplomacy and patching things up after they've roughed things up. But again, it isn't going to lead to that kind of next step in the program. It's more of a ratcheting back effect, which is why they are anti-clockwise, whereas the ENTP is clockwise. Anyway, I hope that helped in understanding the ENTP versus the ESTP. Thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more, please consider taking my course. My course goes into all of this in greater detail, so you can understand why these different dichotomies are defined the way that they are, and you can then better use that to really understand the different types and how they compare with one another. Anyway, thank you very much. Hope you had a nice listen.